episode number 81. Hi, you're listening to the Careers Beyond Motherhood podcast with your host, Janine Esbrand. I'm here to help working mums like you to thrive in your careers and in motherhood. I share tips, strategies, and inspirational conversations with awesome women to help reduce the struggle in your juggle.
Time for say, Mummy.
Hello, and welcome to the Careers Beyond Motherhood podcast. It is wonderful to have you here with me today. I am excited about today's episode because we are diving into the topic of maternal health. Now, as somebody who's a working mother of two, who has lots of different responsibilities, I know how hard it is to make sure that you put yourself first. And if you're anything like me, you feel the need to make sure everyone else is okay, that you might be putting your children first or your spouse first or family members or friends, and then realize that you haven't actually spent any time making sure that you're okay. You haven't actually dedicated any time to looking after yourself or putting in place a strategy to make sure that all that you need is there in terms of your well-being. So today I'm excited because we are talking to Arianna Toboada, and she is a maternal health researcher, an author, and a consultant who is dedicated to supporting women in their transition post-motherhood. But a lot of what she shares is relevant at different stages of motherhood when it comes to really thinking about and planning how you're going to approach setting things up in the right way, in the way that is going to allow you to thrive in the work that you're doing. So I'm excited. So let's dive in. Hi, Arianna. Welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you here with us today. Could we start by you giving us an introduction and telling us a bit about you?
So I'm Arianna, like you just mentioned, and I am based in California, in the Bay Area in the States. I'm the mom to a 3.5-year-old, and my work and kind of all of the work I've done both for nonprofits and in private practice has been around maternal health.
Awesome. So there's so much that I want to ask you about, and that's so relevant for my audience. So in terms of maternal health, how did you get into it and how long have you been doing? Because you mentioned that your son is 3.5. Did you say your son?
Yes.
Yeah, is 3.5. And so is this something that you got into way before you had him? How did that work for you in terms of your career pre-motherhood, and then how it's kind of shifted since you've had him?
Yeah, so you're getting it right, getting the nail right on the head. I'm one of those odd people who was working in maternal health and maternity care and maternal mental health long before I was a mother.
Okay.
And so it started really in between university and going to graduate school. I was hired onto a project that was specifically looking at newborn screening in the state of California, where I live. There was a big policy push at one point, and this was kind of 2010, 2011. And so I was part of a team working to interview mothers, and was part of a team working to interview mothers and new parents to really understand what impact the policy was having on their lived experience, particularly for children who had a positive screening, meaning that they had some kind of abnormality, a metabolic abnormality. So that was really my start into the field. So 2009, 2010, and have been working in the space ever since.
That's so interesting. I think that when people think about motherhood, just think about having the baby, but not all of the things that go with it, especially kind of from a maternal health point of view and mums looking after themselves. So is there a particular area where you find that it surprises mothers when they go through the transition, things that they didn't think about before that then come to the forefront and they think, oh my goodness, like this wasn't even a thing that I thought about or even contemplated, and now I find myself here?
Yeah, I mean, I think one area that I've focused a lot of my work on is on social support and connection to resources. And I really do see this universal trend happening, which is all new mothers, no matter how kind of well-resourced they are or how vulnerable they are, just end up needing so much more support than they thought they would. It's kind of this universal, the equalizing factor of, oh my gosh, I need help and I don't have enough of it.
Yeah. And I totally felt that when I had my son. So I have two children. When I had my son, it was literally like the whole world has changed. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea how to navigate this new period. And there's so much that changes in such a short space of time. And I think that in terms of preparation, I just thought about reading baby books and learning about, how the baby grows and how the baby develops. But I didn't think about me and how I would change and how I'd need to change and that kind of thing. So I think for a lot of mothers, it is a culture shock. And knowing where to go then to get that support is difficult because you've never been in that position before.
Yeah. And I mean, like you were just getting at, when you're going from like one moment you are not a mother, you're just like a pregnant person, and the next moment all of a sudden you have this motherhood status, and there's very little time for integration of this new identity. So even like psychologically and emotionally, it's like there is no set time for processing and figuring out what that means for you. It's just like, okay, all of a sudden you have all the caretaker duties, and all the kind of challenge that comes with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned before around kind of networks and growing your networks and making sure that you get the right support. So what kinds of advice do you give to people to say, like, this is the type of support that you should seek out or go for? If someone's listening to this is pregnant or just in those early stages of motherhood and thinking, yeah, I have no idea, where do I go? What should I be doing first? Do you have any like guidance for them around that?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of my favorite activities that I worked on over the years with people who were expecting, and I personally use a tool that is taught to social workers. I went to graduate school in social work, and so I used what's called an eco map quite frequently. And so if you kind of imagine a person at the center of a circle, and then there's concentric circles that go out from that center individual. And so you can think about the layers of support as mapping onto those concentric circles. So closest to the person is people like friends and family and people who are kind of in immediate proximity and can pretty easily help with something like bringing groceries or just sitting there while you have a bad day. And then as you get further out, it's thinking about what community supports are available to me. Is that new moms groups? Is that a friend who I haven't connected with in a while, but who also has a young child that I can reach out to? And then the wider circle is really thinking about professional supports. And so that's often people who have been specifically trained in maternal child health, but you haven't had to call on them or may not even be aware of them before you have a baby. So people like lactation consultants and maternal mental health specialists and pelvic floor physical therapists. So that's how I like to help people think about these layers of support. And then with an eco map, the purpose of it is to map out who is on your map and who is missing from the map. So where the gaps are in your networks of support. And then the idea is, if you could identify the gaps, you can work to fill them.
Yes, I love that. That is so good because it's really practical. It's really easy for people to say, you need to get the right people in your network. And then it's like, okay, how do I do that? So having this eco map is brilliant because, like you said, you can look at it and you can see where the gaps are. And then it's easier for you to say, okay, this is the area that I need to focus on in terms of building more relationships in that area or finding the right people in that area. So I think that's a really, really great resource for people.
Yeah, I used it for myself. I like made myself sit and go through it when I was pregnant. So I feel like it's never too late to think about how to strengthen your support networks.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in terms of your area of focus now, what I found really interesting, I was looking at your website, is that you focus on helping women who are business owners to plan for maternity leave. And in the work that I've done with women who are on maternity leave and are looking at returning to work, it's often focused in the area of corporate. So they've been in a corporate environment, and now they're either deciding whether to go back to work or to start out on their own. But the whole maternity leave and that piece is very much in the context of corporate. So I was really interested to hear more about how you focus on helping those who are entrepreneurs, because I think people forget about that. Like, it's like the idea is, if you're not an entrepreneur, it's easy to think, oh well, yeah, you're an entrepreneur, so you know, you get to manage your time, so if you have a baby it's absolutely fine. But actually it's really difficult, because you have your own business and because you're running everything yourself. It's actually harder for you to take time off. So I'd love for you to talk more about how you got to that being your niche, and then kind of the areas that you mainly focus on with those types of women.
Sure. And this is such a fun conversation to have with you, because I feel like our worlds intersect at these like very specific places, this being one of them, is
Yeah.
the whole maternity leave and the unique set of challenges that women experience regardless of what kind of work setting they're in. So I started out in private practice in 2013, and I was more broadly focused on maternal health, postpartum health, and the transition from a what we call in social work a biopsychosocial perspective. So thinking about bio the body, psycho the mind, and social your social.
Okay.
And so those were kind of the three-prong approach I took to the work. But really what I found after a few years is, for, this is in hindsight, it sounds like, oh yeah, this was so clear. But it took me a while to figure out that clients were primarily women who were self-employed. And I didn't really see it until a good year and a half into things, where everyone was coming postpartum and being like, I need help now figuring out the business side of things, and how, it's been great working together on kind of the biopsychosocial, my individual journey, but where I'm really struggling is how I am reconnecting with my business, how am I restructuring my role. And so in 2015, I said, okay, I'm just going to tweak a little, tweak a part of the service and beta test it a little bit. And what I ended up focusing on was really starting to work with people in their second trimester instead of postpartum, and added in a kind of a line of inquiry specifically about their business. And so instead of just gathering information from the body, the mind, and the social, I also started gathering their business model information, their what their team was like, what revenue was like, what their business model was, and tested out a service where we could do both, where we could talk about how maternity leave fit into their business plan as well as their personal life. So essentially how to design a leave that would not only meet their personal needs, but also their business needs. And that stuck. And that's the primary service I've been offering since 2015.
That is so interesting, and I love what you said about, paying attention to the people that were coming and what it is they really needed help with, and then tweaking your service to suit. And so now with those women, what does it look like to kind of plan out? So are they looking at their business and then saying, well, these are the systems I'm going to put in place, or am I going to hire somebody? Like, what are some of the common things that people tend to say they're going to do to help them transition back into their business?
Yeah, so a big part of it is getting everything that is in their head into an operations manual. So some people really do have some systems documented, and other people, they primarily live in their heads, even when they have a team executing on systems. So that is a big part that I find on the business side, is helping people get all their systems and procedures documented, and then that usually turns into them being able to delegate a lot of what is on their plate. So it's talking through kind of what they currently do in their business, and thinking through based on how many weeks or months, or what kind of leave they want to take, what needs to come off their plate and what needs to be handled by someone else.
Yeah.
So we kind of reverse engineer. We really start by imagining like, what is the ideal maternity leave, and then
Mm.
working backwards to what would it take on the business side to allow you to do that.
Yeah, I love that. And I know that in the States, the period of maternity leave normally in, in the corporate setting is very, very short compared to over here where we get to take up to a year. So for those that are creating their own maternity leaves, what types of periods do they generally take off? Is it similar to what it would be if they're in corporate, or do people give themselves more time?
Yeah, so I actually think people, one of the most interesting things is that um, this not very generous model is like what people have in their minds as like what maternity leave looks like, especially if
Mm.
they don't have kind of this global awareness of what maternity leave looks like across the globe. And so people think that they're supposed to take no longer than 3 months, and B, that they are supposed to be 100% on maternity leave. And that really doesn't feel feasible for most business owners to completely check out of their business no matter how long. So I find that what most maternity leave plans end up really focusing on is identifying how many weeks, and it usually is weeks, not like 6 months, that they want to be totally checked out, and then what is the lowest hanging fruit for kind of stepping back into things. And so I really encourage and design a phased approach where people are able to keep tabs on their business without having to step back into their role. And that oftentimes happens 4 weeks, 8 weeks, but we're really trying to figure out how they are not just getting back into the grind and not having to go from 100% on maternity leave to 100% back into their role at their company or business. So I would say like over the course of 6 months to a year is really when they progressively ramp back up
Okay.
towards what you might call like a full-time
Yeah.
thing. So it is one of these interesting conversations that I often have with clients. It's like, because first of all, the model that exists in the US is like crap anyway. So let's not follow that, but let's also take this as an opportunity to think about a model that would actually work for you, which is very different than if you're working for an employer.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you're now that you're a mom, you're essentially your own ideal client, I guess. Like you went through a period where you were doing for yourself what you do for your clients. So when you've been in those shoes yourself, like what has been the biggest challenge for you as a business owner who then went on maternity leave and then going back into your business?
Yeah. Yes, you're totally right. I like filled myself in on my client roster and took a slot, and the time that I would have dedicated to working with a client, I spent the time going through my own materials and planning for my own leave. I think the biggest challenge that I faced was really thinking differently about setting and reaching goals. I'm a pretty type A person, so if I set a goal, I like to reach it. And I just found myself not really knowing with the combination of childcare that I had and kind of depending on the amount of sleep or not,
Mhm.
what I would be capable of in any given day or week after my son was born. He was like not really a sleeper. So that really impacted my ability to kind of gauge for and plan my productivity. So I really struggled with figuring out, what do I even set myself up to achieve, and what is even feasible when it comes to goal setting.
Mm.
So what I ended up doing, I used to kind of religiously set annual goals and then quarterly and then monthly. And I really found myself just no longer able to goal set and vision past like one quarter at a time. So I still use that, even though, developmentally things are much more stable. Like my child is not changing how much he sleeps or eats week to week anymore. But I still find it really helpful to bring that line of vision just a little closer and think about, okay, what are the next 3 months going to look like?
Yeah, I think that's really important as well, to adjust in those types of areas, because if you're really used to planning the whole motherhood journey and process, is just it takes that away. It's really hard for you to be able to plan the way that you used to, because you have this little person who basically dictates everything. So it's good to be able to take like a more flexible approach to things and say, look, I'm going to set myself a plan, but I know that things don't always go to plan, and that's okay, but still have your way of planning and addressing things.
Yeah. And, I found like I was pretty resistant to it. I was like, what? Like I need to know what is happening. Like have some area of my life where I feel somewhat in control, because everything else felt so out of control. But what really helped me kind of go with this quarterly planning was to really frame it as a spirit of experimentation. And what can I learn? There's something to be learned from experimenting this way in these next 3 months. And, if it changes halfway through, if I learn something that changes the direction, then I'll cross that bridge when I come to it.
I love that. And my next question was going to be around kind of any tips you would have for someone who's at the stage where they're about to go on maternity leave, and whether it is going back to corporate or it is them going back to their business, and they're like, I don't see how in the world I'm going to be able to make this work. Have you got any tips for anyone who's feeling really overwhelmed by the whole idea of working motherhood?
Yeah. So one of the things I most like to do myself, and I do see it work for kind of anyone, is identifying 3 people in your life who are just a few steps ahead of you. So maybe one person has a child that will be like a few months older than yours, 1 or 2 months, finding someone that then is 6 months ahead of you on the journey, and finding someone who's a year ahead, and really kind of, whether it's in your mind or actually asking, making these people your mentor. And being able to have people who are a little further down the road, who you can both use as a mirror for your own experience and say, did you experience this? What was this like for you? Someone to ask questions, and someone to turn to and see that the journey is iterative and will change, because even from 1 month to the next, like you can be like, oh, they're no longer in that dark space that I feel like I am in right now. They're dealing with something different. Okay, maybe that will unfold for me, or at least confirmation that things are ever changing and ever moving.
Yeah, I think that is such good advice, because in the day to day, when you're going through it, it feels like this is going to be going on forever. When will I ever sleep? When will they ever stop teething? When will they stop tantruming? It always just feels like a lot. So to be able to look ahead and say, do you know what, this is actually just a phase, and I can see it in somebody else's experience, then that can really help you to stay present in the moment and say, okay, let's just make the most of it. It's not going to be like this forever. So yeah, I love that. I love that tip. That's awesome.
Talking to people. I mean, I feel like my
Yeah,
default is always just like, how can I find someone to talk to?
exactly. It's good to talk. So I like to ask my guests if they have like an inspirational quote or motivational saying that they like to refer to. So do you have one?
Yeah. So I've been, for I feel like as long as I can remember, back to my adolescent years, been a part of kind of women's groups and organizing groups that really tried to center the kind of the female experience. And so one of the quotes that I heard most early on is by Audre Lorde, who's a famous lesbian poet. And the quote, it's been kind of turned into memes of different varieties, but the quote, as I learned it, is about that self-care is not a nice to have. It's an act of self-preservation, and that is a key part of what is going to keep you going in moments of struggle. And I always find myself coming back to that.
Yeah, that's so important, because that looking after yourself and doing the things that you should be doing for your overall well-being often gets pushed to the bottom of the pile, right? When things get busy. So the fact that, it's not a nice to have, like it's an essential, is something that we should remember as a really good point. So thank you for that. So if people wanted to find out more about you, your work, and follow you on social, where is the best place for them to find you?
So my home on the internet is just my name. My website is ariannatoboada.com. It's not a particularly easy name to spell, so I'm sure you can go to the show notes.
Yes, absolutely. I'll put the links in the show
You want
notes.
to directly click. And then probably an easier to remember website is where I have a book coming out in 2020 and called The Expecting Entrepreneur. So that is a website if you want to learn more about the book, and resources specifically for entrepreneurs can be found there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us. It's been brilliant. It's great to hear your perspective, and the golden nuggets that you have shared have been brilliant. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was such an insightful conversation. One of the things that really stuck out to me was the fact that oftentimes when we think about transitioning into working motherhood, we often focus on returning to work, getting the right flexibility, finding the right role, and the difficulties and challenges that come with that, but don't always think about, well, what does it look like if you start out a business on your own, or what does it look like if you are already a business owner and you go on maternity leave? So looking at things from that perspective and really hearing about Arianna's experience with clients that she's worked with and the frameworks that she's developed is really, really insightful, and also just got me thinking about different ways that you could be approaching the work that you go back into doing as well. So I hope you found it as insightful as I did, and if you know anybody who's about to go on maternity leave or who has recently gone on maternity leave, then do share this with them. Also, I'd love for you to leave us a rating and review over on iTunes if you're enjoying the show, and why not subscribe so that you can get notified when each new episode comes live. Now, if you want to learn more about Arianna, I'm going to be putting a link in the show notes to her website. So if you go to lightboxcoaching.com/episode 81, then you can access the show notes. So I look forward to being with you again in the next episode. And until then, look after you, look after your babies, and make sure you go and subscribe. This podcast features music from Ben Sound.